Hey gang, welcome back to Gen X Horror. We talk about all things 70s and 80s horror and nostalgia. Today we're diving deep into the dusty VHS bins of our collective childhoods to unearth some absolute bangers that probably traumatized you during a sleepover in 1986. Those movies your older cousins swore would melt your brain while your parents were playing gin rummy with the neighbors completely oblivious to the psychological damage that was being inflicted on your tiny mind. Today we're talking about those obscure horror flicks that likely never made it to the local theater, but absolutely dominated the mom and pop video stores. And whether you discovered these bad boys during a late night HBO free preview weekend, or you were the kid who could somehow sweet talk the video store clerk into ignoring ratings, these films carved out permanent real estate in our Gen X brains. So come on, man. Grab your Crystal Pepsi and that pizza that's been sitting out for 3 hours because we're taking a chronological ride through a humble handful of curated insanity that'll make you question why your parents ever trusted you were doing something normal in the basement at 11 p.m. Honestly, we knew they were just happy you weren't in their face. Let's get into it.
No, I didn't see it. You should watch where you're going, Carol.
You're weird, Ronald.
I am not weird. I want you to say you're sorry.
Let go of me.
Now, first off, you're never going to beat the weird allegations with homicide. That scene was eerily reminiscent of 1981's The Pit and is a lesson on avoiding uppity gals with banana seats. IMDb states the plot as a perverted teenage boy who lives in the walls of a house finds the house sold to a family after his mother dies. Then he falls for one of the new residents, and while I do not think he is actually perverted per se, or started out as perverted, a few years in a wall can for sure do strange things to a kid. Either way, picture this. It's 1987. You're flipping through channels past midnight, and suddenly ABC is rerunning this made-for-TV nightmare that feels like it was specifically designed to make you check behind your bedroom walls for the rest of your life. Bad Ronald shows a socially awkward teenager who accidentally kills a girl, as is known to happen often in the 70s, I guess. So his enabling mother decides the most logical solution is to wall him up inside their house. Like he's the world's creepiest Anne Frank, I guess. And honestly, his digs are pretty sweet. When mom dies and a new family moves in, Ronald's been living in the walls for years, slowly losing his grip on reality and developing an unsettling obsession with one of the new teenage daughters, as any red-blooded American boy in the walls would. The actresses that played sisters were real-life sisters. Also on IMDb, a 10 out of 10 reviewer stated, "Now, on to the murder scene. The little bratty Carol Matthews indeed got what she deserved, taunting poor Ronald about not being able to hook up with her slutty sister, and most insultingly calling his mom weird. Indeed, her head smacked onto a cinder block, but I think she got off easy for all the atrocities this little punk said." And that's fair. The lowest review, a lonely reviewer giving it a 3 out of 10, stated, "I will admit that Bad Ronald is very good by middle 70s TV movie standards, but the rating it has gotten here is ludicrous. More than 45% of voters gave it a 10 rating. To rate Bad Ronald with the best films of all time should prompt an immediate and extensive reality check. And man, was he downvoted to hell. It's obvious at this point this wasn't some underground VHS obscurity. This was primetime network television in 1974, proving that broadcast TV used to have way more guts than we give it credit for. And the film became a cult classic through endless late-night reruns and caught us completely off guard. The fact that you can't check inside your walls without thinking about this movie decades later is a testament to how effectively it burrowed into our collective Gen X subconscious. It's basically the primetime flick that weaponized suburban architecture against us. I don't have specific memories of watching this as a kid. I was born a year before this came out and would have stumbled across it much later, but I do recall thinking of people living in the walls for years growing up. Only living in apartments in Chicago, however, I felt pretty safe, but I know that came from somewhere. Let me see those hands in the air. That is a banger track for the opening of a trailer. I'm struggling with the title on this one. It's 1980. It's Antropophagus, or the Grim Reaper, and I'd rather call it the Grim Reaper. In some places, you'll see it as Antropophagus, which makes more sense because it's anthropology. Either way, if Bad Ronald made you paranoid about your house, then Antropophagus, the Grim Reaper, made you paranoid about literally everything else, especially remote Greek islands and anyone who looked even slightly hungry. We're going to look at the reviews again, and a 10 out of 10 reviewer stated, "This is the horror that makes you scream all the time, all the way." D'Amato's masterpiece reached a higher level in the Gorehound horror feast in the early 80s. The brutal scenes, George Eastman's amazing performance, and the unspeakable creepy atmosphere makes this movie an all-time horror classic, a must-see. Now, how could there be any different take than that? Well, here's how. 1 out of 10. Wasting about 1 hour just to introduce us to the bland characters who are free-loving hippies sailing on some yacht near the Turkish islands. We quickly learn not to care about them at all. Once they land on the island, the suspense should begin, but all we're shown are vignettes that are run-of-the-mill typical, the sex-starved guy, the screaming girl, etc. This was boring as heck, and once the crazy monster played by some half-bald idiot in awful makeup comes on the screen, I had to laugh. And honestly, I think the more one-star reviews a movie has, the better of a time it ends up being. Like, I am here for the sex-starved guy, the screaming woman, and for sure, the half-bald idiot monster. Like, aren't we all? This Italian gut-muncher, literally from director Joe D'Amato, and not the Joe D'Amato I graduated high school with, follows a group of tourists who stumble onto an island where a shipwrecked cannibal is living his best life, eating literally everyone he encounters, culminating in one of the most infamous scenes in horror history, where our antagonist eats his own intestines after being disemboweled. Now, that's a spoiler, and I can't not spoil it because I have to mention it because it's insane, and this is why you're watching this movie. Well, you know what? We'll call it a teaser. You knew this one was special because it was the very first film reviewed by John Bloom, who would later go on to be Joe Bob Briggs in the mid-'80s for the Dallas Times-Herald. The film was part of the glorious early 80s wave of Italian cannibal movies that somehow made it onto American video store shelves despite being banned in multiple countries. And it became legendary among horror trading VHS collectors who would dub copies of copies until the picture quality looked like you were watching it through a screen door. Star Luigi Montefiore, under his George Eastman pseudonym, also co-wrote the script and reportedly did his own stunts. And honestly, when you're making a micro-budget Italian horror film, everyone wears multiple hats and eats their own damn organs. This is the movie that made you grateful your parents had no idea what unrated actually meant when you rented it for the 8th grade sleepover. And the movie that probably ended that sleepover at about 45 to 50 minutes into this masterpiece.
History took place on a small Midwestern college campus. Each victim was a sorority co-ed.
Debbie, was that you?
Are you still alive? Like, it's an odd question to ask in the middle of the night, but hands down the most appropriate one in this context. Here's a fun piece of trivia to drop at your next Brotherhood Gen X gathering in some wood-paneled basement. Blood Cult holds the distinction of being the first movie ever shot directly on video to the home market, which sounds quaint now, but in 1985, it was basically the indie filmmaking equivalent of the printing press. This Oklahoma-shot regional slasher follows a series of ritualistic murders at a college campus where body parts keep showing up in lunch pails, even though Tupperware for sure had already been invented. And a small-town sheriff has to uncover a cannibal cult operating right under everyone's noses. The final girl is more like a final mom, and the awkward romance and intimate scenes seems like they are really pushing this gilf on you hard. And honestly, I loved every awkward second of it. Director Christopher Lewis made this for roughly 27 grand from an original budget of 25 grand. And what they splurged on to cost an extra 2 grand is anyone's guess, but the marketing alone was 4 times that tiny budget at 100 grand. But it looks exactly like you'd expect something shot on consumer-grade video equipment to look, giving it that gloriously raw, local access TV aesthetic that somehow makes everything feel far more dangerous than it really is. This was shot in about 9 straight days and is noted that most of the cast and crew just took a week off work to marathon this script to video and got right back to the 9-to-5 grind. Man, what a time to be alive, am I right? The highest review on IMDb was a 10 out of 10 as a joke, so we'll keep it real with the next closest a 6 out of 10, with an earnest review that brings back all the nostalgia of 2004. Found this winter on the shelf at my local Blockbuster. Not bad for what it is. It's a great B movie with very little if no budget. The cast is made up of a group of local friends, far from professional. They hold your interest. They're shot somewhere in Kansas or Oklahoma. It's nice to see a straight-to-video movie that made it to the video stores. And as always, the worst reviews sell the movie completely with this 1 out of 10 banger. Hitting the ground running, the film begins with 3 murders in a row. No plot, no characters, no motivation. The second murder happens off screen, and that victim's severed head is actually used to quite efficiently bludgeon the third victim to death. I mean, guys, honestly, that review should have been on the box art, am I right? Like, that is the tagline. The film basically invented the direct-to-video horror market that would explode throughout the rest of the 80s, paving the way for literally thousands of shot-on-video horror flicks that filled store shelves and gave us something to rent when all the good stuff was already checked out. And that is 100% subjective. Blood Cult is like that scrappy garage band that never really got famous but inspired everyone else to pick up a guitar. Except instead of guitars, it's camcorders, and instead of music, it's people getting dismembered in decidedly low budget and low lighting fashion.
Seven beautiful co-eds are on a special project for their college. They're spending the weekend at the mansion of a recently deceased college benefactor. They expect a weekend of fun-filled partying, until evil forces take control and turn them into girls' school screamers.
Oh man, look, anything coming after the opening of that trailer is gonna disappoint. The toss down the stairs was the perfect punctuation of that title. You know, speaking of shot-on-video nightmares, Troma's Girls' School Screamers took that Blood Cult formula and added a healthy dose of what's actually going on here? Confusion that made you wonder if the tracking on your VCR was broken or if the movie was genuinely this incoherent. This 10 out of 10 reviewer gushed so hard I felt it was a plant. The finishing school that finished them, and that's the cover art. Girls' School Screamer is a masterwork. It is hard to describe the haunting beauty of this film. Brace yourself for a psychological roller coaster in the classic slasher film. And that's 100% put there by the director. The lowest rating was a 3 out of 10, which I guess is good. We didn't hit the ones. And while it doesn't sell the film like other low scores, it does turn you on to another title. John P. Finnegan also wrote Blades, a golf-themed slasher that I know I'll have to sit through one of these days. After a great opening where a bride ghost shows a melting face to some spooky synth, I was expecting more. But then there's no actual death until 50 minutes more. So there you go. If you're a slasher completist, and yes, I am certainly one, you can mark this one to avoid. You know, for the movie itself, a group of Catholic schoolgirls, because man, it's always Catholic schoolgirls, spends the weekend at a creepy mansion doing inventory for their school fundraiser, only to discover the place is haunted by the ghost of a murdered jewel thief who may or may not be working in conjunction with actual living killers. The plot is crazy ambitious for a movie that looks like someone's horribly edited wedding video from hell. Director John P. Finnegan shot this in Rhode Island for likely nothing, and it shows in the way we love it to show. The acting ranges from community theater dress rehearsal to reading directly off of cue cards, but there's still something unsettling about its off-kilter pacing and out-of-place dream sequences that feel like what can only be described by me as NyQuil nightmares. This is the movie you discovered 3 years after it came out, buried in the bottom rack of your local video store next to 8 copies of Ghoulies 3. And you rented it based on that gloriously exploitative cover art featuring a few hot screaming girls that promised more exploitation than the actual film delivered. Though it somehow still delivered enough weird energy to be memorable. Girls' School Screamers is the cinematic equivalent of that one friend who tells stories that don't quite make sense, but you're entertained and locked in anyway. And honestly, after, bear with me, Antropophagus, Earlier on in this list, you probably needed something a little less intestine focused, and by comparison, this is borderline after school special. Is it just me, or does that sound like the opening of the A-Team or the Fall Guy or hell, even BJ and the Bear? Up next in this molehill of VHS madness is another Italian cannibal entry, because one will never be enough for us. And this time we've got a legitimate Hollywood star, John Saxon. Yes, a Nightmare on Elm Street's Lieutenant Thompson himself, slumming it in glorious exploitation fashion. John Saxon actually agreed to be in the film based on a poorly translated English version of this script, which omitted the cannibalism scenes and appeared to be a simple Vietnam War allegory. He found out about the actual content during filming and was so shocked he briefly considered dropping out of the movie altogether. He has never watched this final film. Cannibal Apocalypse follows Vietnam veterans who return home with an unfortunate case of virus-induced cannibalism that they contracted from Viet Cong prisoners, turning suburban Atlanta into a flesh-eating war zone as Saxon's character tries to resist his increasingly overwhelming urge to snack on his neighbors. It's basically a zombie movie without the zombies and a PTSD allegory with actual bite. Let's see what I did there. Director Antonio Marghetti shot this in 1980, but it didn't hit American VHS markets until the mid to late 80s, where it became a staple of the horror section under multiple titles, including Invasion of the Flesh Hunters and Cannibals in the Streets, because Italian horror distributors believed in the power of excessive renaming. The film works as both genuine horror and unintentional social commentary on how America treated Vietnam vets. Though let's be honest, you probably rented it because the box art looked gnarly and John Saxon's present gave it just enough legitimacy that you could argue it was a real movie if your parents caught you watching it. As always, we're going to look at the reviews, and I say as always, but we just started doing this, and it's a lot of fun. A 10 out of 10 review states, every second of this movie I loved. This is how you make entertaining movies. I loved this movie. No matter how wacky, weird, kind of stupid the plot is, everything here works. I can safely say that this is probably one of the very few movies that I was not bored at all. The action, the pacing, everything is spectacular. Now again, how can someone have an opposite take? While a 1 out of 10 sells the entire movie once again. The worst scene in the movie is probably the sewer scene near the ending. It's dark and vague. I didn't understand where they were going or what was going on half the time. And why did the police have a flamethrower? I mean, what? Nothing in this movie makes any sense. Don't waste your time on this. My God, please waste your time on this. Why do the police have a flamethrower? What are they doing with it? Why would you not want to see that? This one bridges the gap between legitimate cinema and total exploitation madness. Much like how we Gen Xers bridged the gap between analog childhoods and digital adulthoods. Forever caught between two worlds, occasionally wanting to eat people, metaphorically speaking. Taking just a sliver of nostalgia from the ether and looking at some seriously unhinged cinema, and it probably explains a lot why we turned out the way we did. And honestly, these films are still out there waiting to traumatize a whole new generation or re-traumatize us for the 100th time. You heard some of those misguided and dead-on IMDb reviews thrown in there, and the fact that people are still passionately debating whether Bad Ronald is a masterpiece or a fever dream in 2025 is exactly why we love this stuff. Drop a comment and let me know, do you side with the 10-star This Changed My Life reviews or the 1-star I Want My 90 Minutes Back crowd? And hey, what other forgotten VHS bangers are hiding in your aging brain that we need to cover? Maybe you've got some deep cut recommendations that'll make everyone go, wait, that exists? Personally, I'm interested if anyone recalls catching Bad Ronald on NBC in the day. Gang, we're building the ultimate Gen X horror time capsule here, and I've never had more fun doing something, ever. Stay cool, all.